Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's debate. The motion has escaped me. I think it's this house would ban street preachers from Pride. You're all very welcome to be here, and yeah. Do we have any council announcements this week? Anyone? Go.
Right,
State your name, please.
Right.
Thank you.
So on the 25th of October, which is Tuesday, not next week, the week after, we've got the return of the Literific's annual Stormont Mixer, which is basically where we all go to Stormont and have a tour of the buildings and then have a debate in the Senate chamber of Stormont. And this year's going to be slightly different because we're going to have a representatives of the different political parties to participate in the debate, and the vote will be this House believes the protocol has negatively impacted Northern Ireland. And so I'm going to put up on the Literific's Instagram the sign-up form because we need the Stormont events team require us to give a list of people who are coming. So if you're interested in attending that, please sign up and I'll put up the link as soon as possible, or as soon as the Queen's Wi-Fi will allow me to upload it.
So never. Thank you, Ryan. Do you have one?
Okay, so the usual every week. Next week our debate is this House regrets deposing Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. It is full. With extras. However, the week after this House would abolish mandatory coalition, there is one space left on opposition. So if you want to speak 2 weeks from now on that, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything? No? Just one for me is that we are still recruiting for outreach and secretary. So if you want to run for those positions, you can either speak to me in the pub afterwards or email or give the page a message basically, and we will factor that in for the SU elections, which will be on the 3rd of November, I think. So that's whenever you'll get to vote on your new secretary and outreach officer. That is every announcement, I think, for this week. So it is my pleasure to welcome Josie to take the minutes for last week's debate. So give Josie a big round of applause, please.
God, I need to find a quicker way of getting around the table here. Okay, welcome everyone. On the 6th of October 2022, the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society convened for the 3rd ordinary meeting of the 174th session for the motion, "This House supports a general strike." As usual, the meeting began with announcements. James Orchin, HLM, announced the first training workshop of the year was to take place on the 10th of October. Taoiseach McSparran reminded the House that the Irish Times debate was commencing in late October to early November. After a reading of the minutes, the meeting moved to private members' business. Ciara Swale, HLM, brought up the news of Elon Musk buying Twitter, dictating the stock market. Responses were heard by Owen Usher, James Orchin, HLM, Jacqueline Bonner, John Lavery, Ryan Hoey, HLM, Luke Maguire, Ellie Byrne, HLM, and Daniel McCormick, our late president. Jamie Warren raised the news of the government's decision to back out of tax cuts for the rich, undermining Liz Truss's political influence. Responses were heard by Megan Hewitt, Christopher Lynch, Ellie Byrne, HLM, Gary So, Ryan Hoey, HLM, Owen Miller, Holly Guy, and James Orchin, HLM. Owen Usher presented the news of Fintan Bray, the first person with Down syndrome to be elected as recruitment officer to Fianna Fáil. Responses were heard by Megan Hewitt. President's questions then took place. President Emeritus Daniel McCormick asked how the president was, how sweet. Daniel Toft then asked the president what he'd had for breakfast. The president had not... The president had not had breakfast and was met with shouts of shame. James Orchard, HLM, went on to talk about an embarrassing incident he'd faced at work. James asked our infallible president had he ever faced a similar experience. Unfortunately, none came to mind. After President's questions, the vote of prior opinion was held. There were 40 votes for the aye, 8 votes for nay and 10 abstentions, so the proposition had it. First on the proposition was Kira Swale, HLM. She argued, with the cost of living, how are we going to pay our bills? Further to that, there have been massive shortages in essential NHS staff, threatening the welfare of the public. She proposed that a general strike will force the government to reform the policies that have impacted the economy. With the Labour Party no longer being a strong opposition party to push drastic social reform, a general strike is the only viable option left. First in the opposition was James Orchin, HLM. First, James cited a historical example of failed general striking, in which 1.7 million mining workers marched out of their workplace, striking for 9 days. As a result, the government went on to hire middle-class workers to replace them. He also depicted a French strike, in which the strikers just decided to pack it in and go back to work. Ultimately, general striking led to no change in terms of the government's power over the workers. He was then asked by President Emeritus Daniel McCormick why he hated the poor. He denied that he hated the poor, yet said that a lot of strike action, when too extreme, would lead to a loss of support from the wider public. Second on the proposition was Jacqueline Bonner. First, she proposed that the benefits of a general strike outweighs the negatives, with one being that it forms the foundations for the solidarity and unity of the state. Jacqueline presented the idea that France has some of the most protected rights for workers, sorry, I get them confused, as a result of their habit of general striking. Ultimately, pressure must be put on the institution to ignite real change. Second on the opposition was Dermot Hamill. Dermot argued that the Labour strikes have only helped to crash the economy, with strikes seemingly not empowering the workers. He went on to propose that the public would suffer as a result of the general strike, with the bin strike in Northern Ireland resulting in rats rampaging on the streets. However, a general strike will have no impact on the billionaires who may be the instigators to the strikers' anguish. With unions not being funded properly, there will essentially be no financial support for the strikers. The final speaker on the proposition was Ellie Byrne, HLM. They argued that all workers would suffer in their own homes with or without a general strike. They stated that 30% of PhD students have turned to sex work in order to fund themselves out of necessity. Not looking at you, James. One successful general strike was the 1975 walkout in Iceland, in which 90% of the female population protested for equal pay. Within 1 day, this was achieved. Despite the opposition's argument, Ellie claimed that the unions would pay the wages of the strikers and will aid them throughout the action. The final speaker for the opposition was Ryan Hoey, HLM. He began by stating that the government does not have to listen to strikers. Historically, the government has enlisted the support of the army to crush any strike action. Ryan argued that with the relatively slow growth from the last financial crisis, a general strike will only push the country into further recession. A general strike will then only serve to impact those that have not been involved in the action itself. Questions were heard from Noah Barnley, President Emeritus Daniel McCormick, Adam Race and Jake Kieran. Following the debate and questions from the House, the vote of speaker ability took place. There were 33 votes for the proposition, 10 votes for the opposition, and 4 abstentions, so the proposition had it. May I take the minutes as read? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josie, for the minutes from last week's debate. It's now my pleasure to turn our attention to private members' business. This is basically your opportunity to raise any point about the news, anything that's on your mind about politics, and get the audience's perspective on it. So if we have any people wanting to make any comments, put your hand up now and I'll come to you. One person? Come on! State your name for the minutes, please.
Ryan, again. God, it is like being back last year, where every single time it would just be me giving prime members. Today, I don't know if everyone's seen that Queen's has announced like £8 million or something for some sort of student cost of living support, and I think, if I remember the details correctly, that it's £450 for low income students and £150 for all students, I think. And then also they're like halving library fines and halving fines for sort of off-campus discipline. So I just wondered what people thought about that. Is it good? Does it go far enough? Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. State your name, please, as well.
Ellie Byrne. I think it's good. I think it's not enough. I mean, obviously, I think everyone can assume that as soon as I put my hand up, that was going to be my opinion on these kind of things. I was actually talking to my neighbour who lives across the way from me, and he's lived in that flat facing me, which I live near Durham University, since he was at uni. Like, he's literally like lived there for like 7 years when he was a uni student, which is really hilarious, watching him as a uni student and then watching him with his girlfriend now, but actually pretend to be a sensible human being. It's hilarious. She's no clue when he opened the door, there'd be like 20 stacks of pizza boxes there, and he lived there with his mate, and now she's there, it's outside. But anyway, sorry. We were talking about student loans and stuff, and he got around the same amount as me 7 years ago. 7 years ago. I am on the lowest income there can possibly be. I get the max loan I can possibly get. Not taking in DSA, I get 5.5 grand for the whole year. It's nowhere near enough. Yes, £450 will line my pocket quite nicely. It should be more, and student finance should be a lot more, and I think Queen's could do a wee bit, just a lot more to help students out in this time.
Thank you. Go for it. State your name for the minutes, please.
Hello, my name is Kirstville. It kind of reminds me of like a conversation I had when I was teaching abroad. So I was talking to students about my university experience, and I asked them, I was like, oh, how much do you think I pay for my uni courses? And then God love them all, them said £100. I was just like, no. I was like, a wee bit higher. And then eventually there was like 4.5. I was like, yeah. And there was like, oh no, and that covers you for food and lodging and all that jazz. And I was just like, oh no. Oh no, that's just for the classes. And then they all got very, very grateful then that they spend absolutely £0 on university. And it reminds me of the time my French friend was complaining about having to pay rent for his uni course, and I was like, but yeah, it just reminds me of the fact that like education is just steadily going up and up and up, and the cost of living is steadily going up and up and up, forcing us to keep getting loans that goes up and up and up. And I was quite fortunate in the fact that I lived in Belfast during most of my uni experience, but I'm aware that a lot of people here have had to pay for rent, and have had to pay for their food, and they've had to wash their own clothes, and like, I don't know why you guys are doing it, to be quite honest now, so fair play.
Thank you. Before I state your name, please, as well.
Dan McCormick. I just want to respond to something that Ryan noted, which was that they're cutting off-campus discipline fines in half. And I just wanted to note that they're absolute bullshit. They are the biggest scam that the university runs, apart from the whole education thing. The idea that if you do something, if you get in trouble for something or do something that they don't approve of off-campus, that they can come along and go, right, you're going to pay us money, as well as, say, for example, if you were fined for doing something, is nonsense. It's utter nonsense, and the worst of it was during COVID. I don't know if any of you got COVID fines over that period, but fining students money for stepping out of line is utterly absurd. So this is just, them shelling out a fraction of the money that they've taken off people over the last 2 years.
Go for it. Ken, sorry, yeah.
Jack Hamlin. I just want to note on that, a friend of mine, actually a very close person friend of mine, for a house party that occurred near his house, not his house. People were moving from that house into his house, and the whole ones had to pay £10,000 in his first year.
Now they only pay 5,000, thanks to the generosity.
Just quickly say that was a combination of both the fine from the government and from the university.
I would also, I completely forgot this until we're talking about off-campus fines. I also think that, you know, the fact that we have that lovely brand spanking new FU building, while it's a lovely building, it's kind of, as a working class student, extremely aggravating to see the fact that they've cut money from the mental health support, by the way, at Queen's. If you didn't know that, their budget went down this year. So the waiting list for now mental health at Queen's are longer. The teachers are planning to go back on strike again because they're not getting paid. Obviously, in the minutes I mentioned about PhD students, and yet they can spend however many million, I'm going to assume, on that lovely brand spanking building, but no support for the students who are paying the money for that building, and they're also about to sell a speakeasy and make more money. And yet, yeah. Where is it?
Thank you. Go for it. State your name for the minutes, please.
Yeah, I sort of agree with what all things said. As far as I just point down mental health, I mean, I think it annoys me every year, and I just comment every year is amazing people running for the student union and constantly talk about how they want to increase national health awareness. It means bugger all. Any of it. They constantly talk about it. It's a bit like saying, well, I'm anti-racist. I mean, you're not expecting me to be overtly promoting racism in the student union. They talk about this, they mean none of it. It's just a buzzword that they're using simply to show that they care. And frankly, from this you see, they don't care. All that matters is to get the spreadsheets adding up, as opposed to mental health.
Thank you.
I would like to just respond to what you said there, is that they are raising awareness of mental health. We're all very aware of what mental health is. The cost of living crisis. So really, I don't think that you can throw shots at student council members because they're doing exactly what they said they would do, which is fuck all.
Anyone got any points on either the SU off-campus fines or the original topic, which was the finance? Yep.
Jimmy Ward. So I want to get a bit anecdotal here. So I did summer work for a lecturer for 14 weeks. He's a millionaire. He's quite clearly not in need of the £750 cost of living he paid. But I mean, I made like a tidy sum from it, so I'm not complaining that way. But basically, if you realise that the base salary for a lecturer is like £35,000 a year, goes up to senior lecturer, reader, professor, you're going 80k plus a year. Like Queen's are paying like ridiculous amounts of money for the salaries of certain academics, and you're like, well, surely you get more students and a bit less than the staff who, unless they're living sort of extravagant, luxurious lifestyles, then like they could probably maybe not necessarily need as much money as what students do. please.
I'm just going to make a point first, is that it's £750 for staff and £150 for students and £450 for low-income students. Yes, state your name please as well.
Ethan McCartney. No, I was quickly checking all the figures there, but I looked it up. So Queen's total income from 2019 to 2020 went up by apparently 23 million for like a support increase of 8 million, and that's not even factoring in obviously like how much they would have saved with costs and all through like remote learning as opposed to like using classrooms and all that kind of stuff. So realistically, they're still profiting a bit.
Yeah.
I just want to make a quick statement. Did we all just hear the fact that Jamie proposed taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor? I'm sorry. Nothing against you, but as a socialist, I never thought I'd hear it. I'm sorry. Anyway.
Any relevant points?
Sorry.
State your name for the minutes, please. Quiet, please.
Megan Kate, and I just wanted to draw a comparison that £150 for a lot of you, especially living in Elms and any other student accommodations, that is a week of rent. That is 7 days of being able to live where you still live. That's not, as we've all established, that's not much at all, realistically. And I'm sure Queen's can do a lot better than that, considering the type of cars that a lot of the staff drive.
I'll take two more. I guess I'm taking 3 more. Yes, your name.
I will also point out that Queen's pissed up, I think it was £500,000 on the Vice-Chancellor's residence last year. I mean, and cost of, like, it's not like it wasn't a cost of living crisis last year. It's still here. We can only get 150 quid. Come on.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so since we're on accommodation on Council 21, not to mention that you have to pay for laundry, that's £5. And the fucking cheeky bastard but up the price for that!
Amazon, by the way, guys. Just saying, a mini washing machine fits in your shower, 40 quid Amazon.
Wait, is there any other points of private members' business that people would want to take up? Any other points? Sorry, you'll put your hands on down. Yes, state your name for minutes, please.
Luke McGuire. I was just wondering what everybody's opinion was on the great man Alex Jones. Being so unfairly fined just north of $950 million for some slight inaccuracies.
Well, you've all come to life, haven't you? Yes, state your name for minutes. Quiet, please.
I just want to say, I'm very much looking forward to the American Bankruptcy Court having this time with Alex Jones' ass.
Yes, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if the case wasn't so heart-wrenchingly awful, it would be fine what was going on. I think my favourite bit was when his private transcripts were sent by his lawyers by mistake. His multiple outbursts in court, such as I think this week claiming that the jury were all radical libs. Which, sounds like something I'll probably end up saying. But, again, it's all very funny, but if you remember, children and some adults were murdered, and that's what this really comes down to. The situation is that this nut job, well, I don't say nut job, because that implies there's an excuse for why he did it. He did it solely because, well, for money and to get a rise out of people, which is his whole model business. And I mean, it's clearly obvious that there's no way in God's green earth that he's going to be able to pay nearly $1 billion. Let me give an anecdote here, right? In school, I had a friend, and we would jokingly sign this person's email up to all sorts of stuff. So for about 6 or 7 years, he's been getting InfoWars supplements, male vitality pills, which apparently make you, I don't know, like stud, and then they don't tell you what's in it. But I thought that's just one thing that I just find very funny is this person does not figure out how to not get these emails. And I suspect now that the company's about to go under, he's going to get a lot more emails asking him to buy essentially what are faulty Viagra pills. And yeah, I'm just going to be honest with you. In a way, it'll be quite sad to see him go because it's so funny. Some of the stuff he says never can. He's a piece of shit.
Just agreeing with those reports, I think it's very funny that they even think he has $1 billion to give in, especially with his main business practice. I remember seeing an InfoWars ad, and it was about, I think it was like testosterone increasement pills, which by the way, that doesn't work unless it's like a HRT program. But there was a day 1 photo and a day 30 photo, and he's in the same pose, but he's just more red. His skin has gone completely red, and he's like holding his breath, but he looks exactly the same. And how that man is supposed to find $1 billion anywhere?
Billion?
Sure,
Yeah, it's a billion.
950 million.
Close enough. Elon Musk will pay for it. There you go. Yep.
I, for one, think that 965 million is absolutely nowhere near enough. Because He has made a living out of attacking people, slandering people, stirring up the far right in America, and he's an absolute scumbag. And to be honest, I think it should be a lot more than 165 million, because he should. I mean, yeah, the fact is he'll never be able to ever go on media again because he with a train there. But I'd like him to not be able to afford the train a little bit more.
Yes, down at the back, state your name for the minutes, please.
No, Armin. Watching like the slow deterioration of Alex Jones' mental state over the years, it's quite a pleasure to watch. Although I will be one of the first people to say when he eventually commits suicide that just like Epstein, he didn't kill himself.
I don't know what that's on the line. Right, I'll take one more or two more.
Actually, can I be finished with a point here?
Yes.
I've gone on to InfoWars here, and
not your first time, James.
A special offer at the moment for what is it? Let me see here. It's 1776. For what was that? Double Patriot shots. Oh, sorry. You can get 50% off DNA Force, which can alter your DNA. Let's see how much this is. It's only $74.95. It's 50% off. So, okay, the option we can get a one-time delivery, or we can get an auto shipment with a 10% It accepts American Express and Visa, just saying, so definitely, I mean, if those guys, I'm gonna look into this if anyone wants to.
Yes, go for it.
Look, this is what America means to me. It means seeing a horrific school shooting and the parents not seeking justice, not even wishing death on the person, but wishing bankruptcy. The only thing worse than that is possibly getting custody of their children.
Last one, yeah. Last one.
Yeah, but essentially, I think it also speaks to like the bigger problem in America, which is just like news isn't news anymore. It's basically theater meant to like annoy people to the point where I remember during my English and French degree, I had to examine one of Tucker Carlson's shows, and it was genuinely incredible just how much nonsense he managed to put into about 10 minutes about liberal communists, revolt, like several things, the middle class.
What's wrong with any of that?
Oh, well, here's the thing. He somehow linked, like, it was so bad. But I had to examine this piece of art, and then I had to examine several from other kind of sources. I realized it's an entire farce. People watch American news now to laugh at it, which I think says a lot about the state of the news in America, where people like us look at it and go, Jesus Christ, how bad can you be?
Are there any other points of private members?
There actually is a land base.
There's also
James, I'm gonna have to strike you down with self-promotion there,
I
James.
thought you said there's
There's actually things
You've got a vested interest in InfoWars. There'll be any other final comments on private members' business that are separate? Is this a separate point? Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Go for it.
I think to continue the whole thing about the Elon Musk wars, sorry, not wars, he's also advocating now that Ukraine give Donbass and Crimea to Russia, which is just mad.
I wanted a quick one. I don't think I've got a quick one. I think did we talk about this last week? No?
Ish.
Oh.
More Twitter.
Ish? Right, go for it. State your name for the minutes, please.
Daniel McCormick. I did see a couple of things that were journalists expressing outrage that Elon Musk was spoken. The idea is denying it, but the idea that he would have spoken to Putin. But I don't know about the rest. I kind of sit there and go, well, fucking someone has to. You know, because if nobody talks to this bloke and they backing into a corner further and further and further. I saw a Telegraph article a couple of months ago that was saying Putin is done, that's it, he's absolutely done. And literally like 3 days later, Putin came out and threatened nuclear war. And you kind of sit there and go, right, let's not kid ourselves here. If you back him into enough of a corner, there is a real threat that the world can go down the shitter really, really, really quickly. And someone really needs to speak to him. And the fact that Elon Musk even has to be, for one, that he's being ostracized for allegedly speaking to Putin, or the fact that people think that that would be a really, really bad thing, is to sit down at a table and try to negotiate some sort of a peace, is a bad thing. Just shows how unbelievably pro-war the American media is and how worried everyone should be about that.
Yes?
I do think that eventually, realistically, we are going to have to speak to, well, not us, but I think that eventually...
our first talker here is Vladimir Putin, obviously.
I think eventually there are going to have to be some negotiations, but I do think that it should be on the Ukrainians' terms. I don't think that the rest of us should pressure the Ukrainians into just going into negotiations until they're ready to do so. I think we should back them to the hills until they get that position.
Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Christopher, from what I've been reading about it, there's a lot of elements within the American Foreign Service for having the idea we should move negotiations beyond Putin to Putin's potential successors, given how badly the war has gone in Ukraine, that we should not directly communicate with Putin to give the signal to the Russian people that we're actually going to be looking for potential people to replace Putin, which I think in some ways is an absolutely awful idea because it gives him absolutely no off-ramp whatsoever, and there's going to be another wave of Novichok getting released very soon. That's the case, I think.
Yes.
I'm just going to agree with what Dan knows. I would also agree with your point. Because, I mean, if there's one way you want the Russian people to come in behind Putin, it is saying, oh, look, the Americans want to do another regime change war. That is not going to work, and especially when you have, for instance, American foreign policy think tanks saying things like, let's decolonize Russia and split it up. So, how is the average Russian is going to respond when they see that? I think honestly, the point here is, I think there are elements, I suppose, going to be, who are probably being egged on by foreign policy wonks in America who are, I'll be blunt, hit hard on for using nukes probably against Russians. And I honestly think that eventually there will have to be talks, and the problem is that the Russians aren't going to agree on completely Ukrainian terms and vice versa. And I think, honestly, I've said this earlier, I hoped it was going to be a shorter war because I just think that it's not preferable. Lots of people dying, especially when you get into winter in that region of the world. I think people at level heads are going to have to prevail in this, because otherwise you're going to have people like the columnists of the foreign policy magazines of the New Yorker who think it's a wise idea to. I think one of them, one of them said that what Liz Truss should have done as Foreign Secretary was go up and punch Putin in the face and say that we're going to colonise you. Okay, I can be honest with you, if that actually happened, it would be amazing to see, but alternatively, we would all probably be like background characters in the Fallout series. The nuclear Fallout. So yeah, I quite like to keep my skin and
This is the last point I'll be taking.
I absolutely do believe that we should have talks, because backing Putin into a corner the way we back rats onto Donnybrook Street just doesn't why is it Elon Musk? Why is it not, I would say Biden, but he struggled to get to Russia, probably collapsed. Why is it not, why is it not foreign policy representatives from the US or from the UK or from the UN? Why is it Musk? What's he going to do? Buy Russia? buy Ukraine and do a leg and pass it off as his own? It's not his. Why have we not set world leaders to do this? Because it is not the job of Elon Musk, who will probably buy Moscow and tell everyone how he built it. But why have we not sent world leaders then?
Can I just
You said you were quick, so yeah.
Yeah, really quick, a response to that is why have they not done that? It's because instead of doing that, right, instead of doing what you suggested, Ryan, which was to go in on Ukraine's terms and negotiate on Ukraine's terms, they were negotiating on Ukraine's terms until Boris Johnson turned up out of the blue and went, don't do that. And then they decided that they weren't going to do that. And on your point is turning around and saying that America should seek a regime change, kind of a situation in Russia. Where has that ever worked before? They've never done it properly. They only serve to make a mess, and the stakes are really, really high this time. And with the West turning around and pressuring them against negotiating, it's not good. It's not good.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we now turn to President's questions. So this is the worst 5 minutes of my week. So many. I will keep this at 5 minutes because we are behind. Yes.
My question was going to be, can we cut President's questions completely and move straight on to the debate?
Absolutely, we'll do that. I don't want to hear any of it.
Yes.
Vote to the House. Second. Someone second it. Anyone? You proposed that you should have seconded it. I'm not engaging in bribery.
You can second it.
Yes.
If you were in Elon Musk's position, would you buy it and then claim that you had built all of it?
What, Russia?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably would. Yes.
You're spicing up a little. What are you going to plan for dinner? Oh, you're planning for dinner?
For dinner?
Yeah.
Ooh. I usually don't have dinner on a Thursday, so I'll have fish and chips or something. Yes.
Sir, I'd like to propose a motion to question what did you have for breakfast never gets raised ever
No.
Seconded.
No, you can.
Why are there so many? I don't want to hear these.
Do you own another suit?
No. I'm in this one. Final one, please.
What are you going dressed up for this Halloween?
I was talking about this on the way here. I actually don't know. No, that would be frightful. I think... No, I haven't decided yet. I'm open to suggestions, if anyone has any. Yeah.
What did you have for breakfast?
Oh, I had cornflakes for breakfast today. Well, actually, switched it up, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, just a suggestion for Halloween costume. If you keep that on, you get away, you can be Judge Judy.
That's not a bad idea, actually. Thank God, that's it. Okay, never mind.
Just
Yeah.
building off of that, if you lost the hair, you can judge murder.
Yeah, I just shave it off for Halloween.
No.
No more.
If I get your mental pin, can I dress up as Matthew Taylor?
No. I can't stop you, but no. Right, that is, thank God, the end of President's questions for the day. So we turn now to the vote of prior opinion. So if you are in favour of the motion that you would ban street preachers from Pride, put your hand up now. I got 13. 13. 5, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I got 16 that time. 16. If you are against the motion, if you think street preachers, quiet please. If you think street preachers should be allowed at Pride, put your hands up now.
That is actually generous.
Count them. How many do you get?
29. If you want to abstain on the motion, put your hands up now. 6. 7. We'll go with 7. Quiet, please. Do you have the numbers?
Yes, so that's 16 votes for aye, 29 votes for nay, and 7 abstentions, so the opposition has it.
And it is now my pleasure to, I have to introduce the rules first, in terms of the rules, as you probably know by now, each speech is 7 minutes long. The first and last minute of your speech is protected time. So you will hear a bell, which then means you can ask points of information. When you hear the second bell, you can no longer ask any points of information. To make a point of information, you can raise your hand and say on that point or point of information. The speaker is at liberty if they choose to take it or not. You cannot raise the point again if they've declined it. That's considered barracking. If it's declined, don't repeat it, as I've said. Also, 2 other points is please don't go to the bathroom during a speech. Please wait until the next speech is started and give a round of applause after each speech. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce the first speaker, I think. Yes, first speaker of tonight's debate, Jack Hamlin. Give him a big round of applause.
Farashid and Chi, we the proposition to find street preachers at Pride as preachers who are attending in protest of Pride and are preaching within designated Pride areas with an intention to disrupt the event. We are not banning religious figures or practicing individuals from attending or taking part in Pride. So let me begin by stating that I am at my core a Christian, but I'm also a queer person. To me, these identities have never clashed. It is my view that God blessed me in all of my mortal faculties, and I've never seen any reason to view myself as lesser in that regard. Sadly, this sentiment is not shared by all Christians. The Christian street preachers that congregate outside City Hall during Belfast Pride celebrations seem to have very little regard for actual scripture. As an ex-Roman Catholic turned Universalist Christian, it would be very bold of me to criticize others on their more wacky interpretations of the Bible. However, in modern Christian thought, many theologists would agree that the use of the Bible as a justification for homophobic abuse is outdated, prosaic, and frankly unbecoming of one's own religious stance. These theologists include Jürgen Moltmann, Hans Kuhn, John Robinson, Bishop David Jenkins, Don Capri, Bishop Jack Spong, and Reverend Craig Witt. I would align strongly with Witt myself, who believes that the use of the word abomination in the prohibitions in Leviticus 18:22 and Leviticus 20:13, that it refers to adulterous and Canaanite sex practices within fertility cults. It does not refer to the modern conception of homosexuality that we understand, which I might add was invented in 1942. In terms of the specific congregation of street preachers we are referring to today, however, I am of the belief that their direct intention is not to purport any religious opinion overall. They are there to disrupt our event. Does this not immediately raise the question as to the capacity in which their presence should be tolerated? If a mob of people appear at a peaceful and celebratory event, in any other circumstance, this would be considered a policing issue.
Point of information?
Yes.
On your definition of the whole debate, you're talking about destruction. What exactly do you mean by destruction?
Screaming in people's faces, obstructing any form of Pride event, and also taking up space within the central sort of organisational area of the event.
Sorry.
Okay. If gay rights activists charged a gathering of a church that still practiced convergent therapy of arguably far more barbaric and cruel practice than should ever be permitted to be exercised by an institution, we would be met with arrests, fines, and ASBOs as well. This is our event. This is our time and place to stand for and celebrate what we believe in. I need not remind anyone in this room that our expression of this pride is freedom of speech, and the intentional impediment of said freedom of speech of a minority group, a registered minority group, as is being practiced by these street preachers, is a hate crime. We have a duty to combat threats to our community when and where we see them. Their viewpoint is noted and even entertained. I'd never seek to impede someone's liberty in terms of their belief. But we hold zero obligation to promise that we will not encourage you to geographically displace your freedom of speech. When we tell you to leave, you're leaving.
What about information?
Not denied. At an event commemorating Stonewall, we should not have to be under scrutiny for our very right to exist and express our love in a modern 21st century society. Too long have we suffered and allowed ourselves to be subjected to our oppressors. As a victim of a violent hate crime myself, I say no more. In conclusion, I leave the house with a quote from songwriter Tim McElrath. Too much blood has flown from the wrists of the children shamed for those they chose to kiss. I've come up a little bit short there in terms of time, so I will actually take any questions when possible. I'll take a question now, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay.
When you were talking about biblical scripture, when
Yes.
it came about homosexuality,
Mhm.
you left out the New Testament, St. Paul talking about it, and Christ talking about the fact that the only appropriate sexual intercourse is within a marriage, which he defined between a man and a woman. Just on your, just on the
At which point was it
Christians-
defined? At which point was it defined between a man and a woman?
Christ,
You can't go back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clarification, with clarification.
Clarification? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can take the clarification.
Yeah, I believe it was Matthew's Gospel once there it is. He talks about it was originally about divorce, so it was, and then he goes on to say that all sex is immoral outside of marriage between a man and a woman. Doesn't simply say gay, but does simply say what the contexts are. Just on the point of the Christian biblical.
In terms of the Christian biblical, can I reply to that? Is that not back and forth?
Yeah.
In terms of the Christian biblical point about Leviticus, that specifically refers, like that is the main sort of scripture that is used against us. In reference to that specifically, that refers to Canaanite sex cults. Our understanding of homosexuality, as it is now, did not exist back then. I know there's that really annoying point that everyone makes about the Greeks and the Romans, but I feel that doesn't necessarily apply here. The oft-cited interpretations of the Bible, wherever it comes to banning same-sex marriage, it very often comes from a mistranslation that it arose in 1942 in the King James Version of the Bible, where it was a mistranslation from a man shall not lay with a man. It was actually man shall not lay with son. That is the genuine purveying sort of sentiment that's to that, and it's reinforced by although I am not a Catholic, that is also the opinion of the Catholic Church, as of right now. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I think one of the questions.
You can still go for it.
Yeah. One of the questions I've always had for these debates that you just slightly touched on was the idea that freedom of speech should be protected unless it's considered hate speech.
Mm-hmm.
And I would understand hate speech in like context of racism or other cases, but from what I can tell, right or wrongly, these people genuinely fight for there to save your soul. So when they have the intent that I suppose can be identified as a good intention, but it's coming out in a way that other people find hateful, where do you draw the lines between what is hate speech and what is not, and what's okay from circumstances?
So in terms of debating whether or not we should be, if they, like you said, whether they're trying to save our soul, I think that that's completely fine. I feel if that's their point of view, they're more than welcome to express that view. At a Pride event, I don't think that that's conducive, because I don't feel that that is what they're going there to do. There are plenty of Christian churches that do practice conversion therapy, whether for better or worse, they do believe that that is the correct thing to do. However, those things are practiced within their church. These people are coming to Pride events with the intent of disrupting the event. They want the event to not happen. Unfortunately, we live in a democracy where there is appropriate channels for them. Hold on. Let me finish. Unfortunately, we live in a democracy where there are appropriate channels for them to do so if they wish to. To them, I say, good luck. Okay?
Massive round of applause for Jack. He is a maiden speaker.
From a queer Jack to a queer Jacqueline, how we vary. Goodness. Esteemed people of the House, my and my team's defense of street preachers at Pride is itself a defense of free speech and a celebration of Pride. While opposing a ban on street preachers could be construed as homophobic, as I'm sure the proposition will try to frame it as, I'm saving all my best homophobia for another night, and so instead will prove to you why the banning of street preachers would actually be to the detriment of Pride and free speech. Homophobic street preachers are a famed nuisance for queer people, seeing as they see their own religious convictions as diametrically opposed to queer people's very existence. However, I would appeal to you to not forget that banning street preachers from Pride would be a condemnation of free speech. Now, I know that the freedom of speech is a tricky beast nowadays, and its meaning has become a chimera. But allow me to simplify what definition of free speech we are defending with a quote by revolutionary Rosa Luxemburg. Freedom is always the freedom of the dissenters. We must always defend the right of the opposition to voice it freely as long as the opposition are not threatening the physical safety of those at Pride events.
On that point?
Yes.
They literally do. So for example, once upon a time, I saw a bunch of lesbian people walking by, and one of the street preachers ran after them till he fell down and then kicked the shutter right next to their head. What would you say in response to that?
I address how I feel the physical threat should be addressed, but it is in a paragraph, if that's all right. Now, members of the House, especially those of you with dyed hair and piercings, I appeal to your own experiences of Pride parades, should you have them. When I and my friends have been in queer parades, there have, in fact, been street preachers, both supporters and of queer people. There's the supporters, who many of us, especially those who grew up religious, appreciate, and there are, of course, the anti-queer preachers who are, more relevant in this scenario. I can quite honestly say that, if anything, the presence of people who seem so utterly emotionally devastated by the fact that the fruits are fruity adds to the atmosphere of Pride. Pride has historically been a protest, and it still is in many countries. I would go so far as to argue that without opposition to Pride, it would become a totally different sort of Pride. One of the main arguments against straight Pride parades is that they have no oppression to be liberated or prideful of. No one has ever opposed their very identity on any systemic level, while queer people evidently have, as is obvious from the very existence of these unruly street preachers. The planning of Pride guarantees that a set, blocked-off road or sidewalk path should be used for the walk, and as such, any bystanders with posters are kept back to the sidelines by nature. One of my personal favorite aspects of Pride is the volunteers of elder gays who have agreed to control the crowd and separate the unruly standers from the parade. Because of these factors, any street preacher that feels rowdy and would try to interrupt the parade, which the opposition would agree is an assault on the queer Pride experience, is not given the opportunity, or rather should not be given the opportunity, and therefore bears no weight when coming to arguing that they are to the detriment of queer people's right to exist. Their disruption of the parade is an organizational issue. I don't consider this to be such an imposition on my and other queer people's freedoms that I see the need to ban them. It's not that I find homophobia or its many vocal expressions to be acceptable. As someone with the hair and queer attitudes of Hugh Grant's Clive from Maurice, I'd hardly find that appropriate. I argue only that the banning of any group from anywhere is something that should be undertaken with utmost prejudice, no pun intended. And the genre of poster-holding street preachers one finds at Pride parades is not anywhere close enough of a threat to queer people's well-being to warrant banning. I do not believe, even in this age sometimes called the snowflake era, that people holding posters and doing camp little yells is anything worthwhile banning from Pride. Additionally, I am of the belief that, in the complete opposite direction, banning preachers actually has a chance of backfiring to the detriment of queer people. It is not a difficult thing to imagine that homophobes would take advantage of this perceived assault on their rights and claim they are being oppressed in turn, thus sparking a right-wing wave of lashback against Pride parades themselves. As my teammates will continue to do, I hope they will prove to you that free speech should be defended in this case for Pride parades.
It is my pleasure to welcome the second speaker for the competition, Molly Hines.
Thank you, President. Good evening, everyone. I want to start off with a wee disclaimer. I have never debated before in my life, so if this is a mess, I'm so sorry. And I also have a tendency to talk really, really fast, so I'll try to slow it down as much as I can. So, yeah, I'm not a debater. I'm just really, really gay. So, and B, ladies, you can DM me. My Instagram is @MollyHines. So I'd like to begin by asking everyone to imagine that they're walking down Royal Avenue in Belfast, maybe to call into KFC to get some popcorn chicken, because I don't care how old you are, it's the best item on the menu. And as you're walking, you see a street preacher likely saying something mildly offensive and being faced down by a group of teenagers brandishing pride flags and dancing to Katy Perry's I Kissed a Girl, which is undebatably a banger. This is a sight that's so commonplace in Belfast city centre, and it's something that most of us don't even bat an eyelid at. But at a pride event, the presence of a street preacher can have a much more sinister impact. Tonight, the proposition will be arguing the case for why we believe that street preachers should be banned from Pride. So I'd like to talk a wee bit about the origins of Pride. So LGBTQ plus Pride is an annual celebration of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and other queer identities. It's an event that commemorates the Stonewall riots of June 1969, which took place after police raided the Stonewall Inn bar in New York City, and has since become an event where queer people can be proud to be out of the closet and can celebrate their identity in a safe community space. It's an institution based on love. If you've never attended a Pride parade before, I really recommend going to one. It's a great day out. The only thing that has soured my experiences at Pride have unfortunately been things that I've overheard from street preachers at the events. Now, I want to clarify that the proposition's argument is not an argument against free speech, nor is it an argument against the freedom of religion. We believe that everyone has the right to the freedom of speech and of the freedom of expressing their religious beliefs however they so wish. In fact, we support religious pride parade floats or any religious groups that walk in the parade because they are showing love and respect. What I argue, however, is that there's a time and a place where street preaching is appropriate. You would never expect to be sat in a Christian church, for example, and for someone to stand up with a megaphone and make outrageous claims about that religion. It would be incredibly disrespectful. And yet at a pride parade, it's expected at this point for there to be multiple street preachers at the event, claiming that marriage can only be between one man and one woman. I'd like to remind everyone that gay marriage has been legalised since January 2020 in this country, and so no one should be denied this right on the grounds of their sexuality. Indeed, the street preacher is in effect arguing against a human right. The opposition may also argue that street preachers are harmless and people should simply ignore them if it bothers them. I'm sure those of you who have walked through Belfast Core Market would know that when someone is using a speaker that is that loud, it's pretty difficult to ignore. There was even a Belfast City Council meeting earlier this year where retail representatives from the likes of Starbucks and McDonald's called for the use of amplifiers to be banned, arguing that their customers felt threatened and they as staff were, quote, traumatised by the street preachers with amplifiers. So having discussed the noise pollution that these street preachers bring, we can now turn our attention to some of the things that they say into their megaphones. This would be an entirely different debate if street preachers were preaching about different subject matters or in a different tone. But in Pride, we know that a street preacher does not stick to reciting the Beatitudes or the Ten Commandments. No, they take the opportunity to condemn the queer community using whatever Bible verses they can easily manipulate. And this is incredibly dangerous. You see, not only is the preacher potentially endangering themselves, but they are spreading harmful messages to a community who are already statistically more at risk to suffer from mental health problems. A recent study by the Stonewall charity found that over half of LGBTQ plus people had experienced depression, 3 in 5 had experienced anxiety, and 1 in 8, aged 18 to 24, had attempted to take their own life. Can you really argue that these people who are already vulnerable should be subject to hearing that the way that they express themselves or express love tarnished on such a public scale? May I also remind the House that the LGBTQ plus community is a minority group that already faces discrimination in day-to-day life. Perhaps if the street preachers were targeting a different minority group, maybe an ethnic minority group or a religious minority group, my friends in the opposition would feel differently in terms of this debate. Maybe then it would be easier to understand that there is a difference between free speech and hate speech.
On that point.
No, thank you. I know not everyone here today is queer, but I would like you to put yourself into the shoes of someone who is for just a moment. Imagine you're going about your day and you overhear someone calling you a sinner, a degenerate, a predator. I use these examples as these are things I've heard in my 19 years living in Belfast. Imagine how that would feel. I can tell you, as someone who's experienced it, it is so destroying. Now imagine that this is happening at a queer event, Pride, an event that is supposed to be safe for queer people to express themselves. It is simply unjust. I, like many queer people, live in absolute fear. I'm not out to my parents, or even my wider family. I even feel vulnerable standing up here now talking about this, because I know that not everyone will agree with my right to exist. And I can honestly say that if I had not grown up hearing homophobia on the streets of my home city, maybe I wouldn't feel so afraid. As a a queer person, sometimes it is so hard to be proud of who you are, especially when you hear people condemn what makes you you in every direction you turn. That is why we need pride, because so many queer people are not proud. If you have any empathy for the LGBTQ+ community, you will agree that queer people need a safe space, a celebration to allow them to realise that being gay or trans, bisexual, asexual, lesbian, non-binary, queer, or just questioning is okay. When there's a street preacher at Pride, the space is no longer safe. And if we do nothing about it, we're sending a message to the queer community that we do not care. The 1936 Public Order Act calls for us to ask ourselves about the greater good and safety of everyone at an event, street preacher included. If someone has a bad reaction to what the street preacher is saying, it could put people in danger. This is a breach of the law if disturbing the peace. And preachers who purposely go to Pride to say something that could offend others and potentially disturb the peace, it would fall under the breach of this law. As previously mentioned, street preachers at Pride cross this line by calling queer people things such as degenerates, or even comparing them to paedophiles, and therefore they should be banned from Pride. This is why you should vote with the proposition tonight, and why we believe that street preachers should be banned from Pride. Thank you.
My pleasure to welcome the second speaker for the opposition, Peter Hutchinson. Please give him a massive.
Good evening, everyone. Perhaps my presence here as a Bible-believing, born-again, reformed Christian may offend some of you, but I want to address immediately some of the issues that were brought up, or some points that were brought up in the previous, particularly Jack's, this idea of hate speech. This gentleman brought up a great point about how it was never the preacher's intentions to spread hate. I'd love you to imagine being in the preacher's position. Imagine you knew a truck was coming and was going to wipe out everyone. The most loving thing you could do would be to tell them the truck is coming. And that is what the preachers are doing, in the sense that they're telling them the truck of God's judgment is coming and the only escape is the Lord Jesus. So it's not hate speech. And they get stuck in outside the BBC News building in London. There's a massive quote by George Orwell that says, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear." If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear.
On that point?
Yep.
So you were saying that it's like, if someone's in front of a truck, you tell them it's in front of a truck.
Yeah.
My question would be, from experience and from working in city centre and hearing it day and day, and also hearing it at Pride, my question would be, would you tell someone to get out of the way of the truck by telling them that they are disgusting and they're a stain on this earth, or would you tell them that you love them, you accept them, they'll come to your side of the road to save their life? That would be my thing about street preachers, is there's definitely a better way to deliver that message. Do you not agree?
No, totally, and I really do apologise if you feel that you're getting from people who profess the name of the Lord Jesus. That is not the message. It's disgusting.
That falls under religious proselytising, which is against the standards.
I'm addressing the point, though. Okay, that's grand. Apologise. We can maybe chat after. But anyways, back to it. Look, this house professes to be a tolerant house of people with different views, different opinions. Surely, at the very least, tolerance must entail allowing people to give their opinion, no matter if you agree with it or not. In fact, there usually, back in the day, there were laws to prohibit certain speeches that attacked particular truths that people held dear. It was called blasphemy laws. In many ways it's reversed now, that anyone who attacks secular truths or truths that people hold dear now, that they should be shoved off, shut up, no one allowed to hear what they are to say. Yeah, sure.
I addressed that earlier. I said that I did not at any point wish to impede any form of Christian free speech. I am a Christian. I said
that these types of speech are somewhere else. It is a geographical displacement of where the speech is made. There are appropriate channels for this speech to be made. At a Pride event, it is inappropriate.
But an attack on freedom of speech anywhere is an attack on freedom of speech everywhere. So once the principle of freedom of speech is intact and you say you cannot raise these opinions at any stage at this event, then that's an attack on freedom of speech everywhere. That principle's gone to pot. And what I would love to ask is, what determines, rhetorically, what determines what speech is offensive? Who determines what speech is offensive? By what standard do we decide that that speech should not be allowed to be said? This is where it's slightly concerning for me, because censorship, which ultimately that is what it is censorship, it is you must not say this at this certain event. To me, I'm okay right now, sorry. It's slightly concerning. Censorship in the hands of a semi-literate mob, that's concerning. Censorship being proposed by university-educated people is absurd, but censorship in the hands of the state is deeply concerning. And once we give the state the right to tell people you must not say this at this certain time, is dangerous. And again, hate speech, I'll clarify, and it's still a point. Hate speech as determined is when it incites violence. This is not inciting violence.
I just have a question. The main point of contention here seems to be that you want to frame it as nice and helpful and telling people to get out of the way of the bus, and the other side keeps on bringing up about the comments like disgusting and the real kind of the vitriolic stuff. Would you agree that the vitriolic stuff shouldn't be allowed, but the gentle, nice, comforting element of Christian and preachers and things like that should be?
Look, I'd love to address this point, but I'm not sure if it's religious proselytizing.
No, you can't.
It's not. So, one half of the message which people are picking up is this idea of sin and sinners. But the Christian message is we're all, every single one of us, it doesn't matter who you identify as or whatever it is, we're all sinners in need of a saviour. That's what the Christian message is. Yeah, sure.
I'm talking about the vitriolic stuff. If you'd address that, I think that I'd be more open to your view.
In terms of vitriolic stuff, that there is a hell, that people are naturally going to hell, is that vitriolic? Because then I can't deny that. I can't deny that. That's Jesus talks about that more than anyone in the Bible. But I've lost my train of thought. Well, if you look back outside Westminster the past few weeks, I really, really hope you were disgusted at the removal of anti-monarchy protesters, at the removal of them. I hope everyone in this house was rightfully disgusted at that. But ultimately, if you vote for the proposition, you are agreeing with the principle that at certain times there are certain things that must not be said in case they offend someone. Are we as a house seriously going to agree that one's right to not feel offended trumps one's right for freedom of speech? If that principle ever is enshrined in law, that is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. But as I close, look, vote against the motion doesn't really make much of a difference. I don't really mind. Yes, it would be great if we cemented freedom of speech as a society. That would be great. It would allow plenty of views to continue. But look, history shows us that the gospel flame is being lit and it will not be extinguished. You can try to shut Christians up. Roman Empire did 2,000 years ago. The Inquisition did 500 years ago. Secular society tries again today. But it will not fail. The gospel will prevail. And vote against the motion.
Peter, for his maiden speech. It is now my pleasure to welcome the finalists on your proposition, Jeremiah Hamilton.
Now, my friends, I too am like the rest of the proposition. I am a little bit gay and I have blonde hair and blue eyes. Now, similarly, if that is anyone's type, my Snapchat's Dermot655. Feel free to drop me a message. Now, my friend across the house mentioned how it was all about bringing people to their side of the road. So let's talk about the vitriol that that the President Emeritus mentioned. Being called a paedophile is not something that, in my opinion, is how you bring someone onto your political persuasion. If at election time the local Sinn Féin councillor came round to me and he goes, "Dermot, you're a paedophile, vote for me," I don't think he'd get my vote. I think if he came round and he said, "Dermot, you're a groomer, vote for me," he wouldn't get my vote. If he came round and told me I was a degenerate, if he came round and told me how I was going to burn in hell for the rest of eternity, well, you know, I don't think he's going to get my vote. But that is apparently acceptable. That is apparently how we convert people to the way of Jesus Christ. My friends, I didn't leave the church. The church left me. I was a student at a Catholic all-boys grammar school for 5 years, and I was outed in second year. And I went through what I would consider 4 years of absolute hell. And, you know, maybe it's not the literal hell, but, you know, it's the closest thing I find that I could really get on earth outside of waterboarding. But I left that school, and I had to, because had I not, I'd have probably, fired myself out in front of that lorry. And I know that is not the easiest thing to hear, but that's what happened to me. And I went to another Catholic all-boys grammar school, and God help me, I feel like it's insanity doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and hoping for different results. I didn't leave the church left me. That was the kind of things that they preached. The same things that were fired at me inside changing rooms about how I'm a paedophile, or how, you know, or about how I'm a bastard and how I'm a degenerate. That's the same thing that is fired at people at Pride. It was that feeling of helplessness that I felt every day in school, every time that I had to sit in a religious class and debate my right to exist. That was what I heard, and that was it provided such a feeling of helplessness that I can't emulate it. I've been in fights, I can't emulate it. The only time I felt that emulated in Belfast was today when I walked up Cornmarket. I was getting my Starbucks because I like to flirt with the barista there, and he's really pretty, and he puts a little smiley face on my cup. And I saw a street preacher there, and he was there with the gays who were holding flags and dancing about and doing all of their cool little thing, Katy Perry, and it was great. But he came up to talk to me and offer me the word of Jesus Christ, and I asked him, I said, would I be welcome in your church if I was gay? And he goes, no, you're another one of them. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but to quote, fuck off. And so that's... And it was only that, it was hearing him say all of his vitriolic stuff that I finally found that feeling of helplessness that I haven't had since I was really a 12-year-old boy in a classroom or in a changing room being told how I was a creep and a pervert because I liked fellas. And, well, I'm not a paedophile, I'm only 18. And, you know, everyone I go for is a consenting adult. That's the kind of stuff that is fired at us at Pride. That is what takes away our safe space. That is what takes away. There is a reason that people need Pride. It is because hate crime is on the rise in Northern Ireland. I think we're the highest rates since 2007 according to the PSNI. That's mental, but I mean, I suppose I'm one of those statistics, so I guess I can relate to it. It is those views, it is the sharing of those views, it is the normalisation. We have had it normalised in Belfast that you walk down the street and you'll probably get called a faggot, but suck it up, because that's Belfast. It's even worse at Pride because you hear it from a much larger group and you hear it constantly in the one place where you're meant to feel safe as who you are. You're meant to feel safe at Pride, and that is taken away. Far away.
I can understand where you're coming from. I myself actually like
Speak up, sorry.
Sorry, I understand where you're coming from. I myself actually secondary students are as well in the same sort of experience. But Pride is not a place to be safe. Pride was a protest originally, and it is meant to maintain its meaning. And aside from that, surely it is a point of educational information for those people to see the actual joy on people who are LGBT. I know that's one of my main things when I attend Pride, is that those who would seek to tell me that I'm going to hell, I can smile in their face and I can walk on, and they see me and my friends who are in the same boat as me experience that. Surely that is a benefit of Pride, and removing them from that area prevents that education.
I would absolutely agree. I wish that if we were at Pride that we could, you know, smile in their face and walk on and happily and wave our little flags and kind of wear much shorter shorts than I really should. But that's not really what you get and I really don't have the legs for him, but I don't care. But you can't just walk past, because when you walk past and you've got a man shouting in a megaphone about how much of a groomer you are, about how you're going to burn in hell, then, you know, and I mean, I suppose it's still warmer than my apartment in this cost of living price, because Queen's only puts the heating on 3 hours a day. But you can't walk past and ignore it, because you don't have a choice. It's not like you know, they're off in this one wee section. We call that Christian angry corner, and you know, if you really want to go be called a paedophile, well, you can go there and maybe rip up a leaflet if you're feeling ballsy. But that's not the option. They're standing alongside a pride, quite often walking alongside it to tell you how much of a bastard you are, and that's not really what Pride is meant to be about. Pride, yes, is a protest. Pride absolutely is. That is what Stonewall provided us with. It is a protest. But what kind of protest do you have where you feel unsafe? That is not what you're meant to do. You're meant to organise, you're meant to come together, you're meant to provide that safe space. You know, if I went to, say, a protest on the cost of living, I'm not expecting Scrooge McDuck to come out and box me in the head or tell me how I should just get on with it. That is not what Pride is about. Pride is about coming together and celebrating who we are and feeling safe in being able to do so. For a lot of people, it is the one day of the year where you can walk out, you can put on a bit of makeup, you can maybe fire on a little rainbow under your face and wear something. See, that is what Pride is meant to be about in the modern day, and street preachers take that away. They remind us of the hell that some of us have went through, the hell that some of us went through in school, and it is not good enough. And I say this, your hate is not welcome here.
My pleasure to welcome final speaker for the opposition, Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to start with a few points of rebuttal to the proposition's argument this evening. Firstly, the way that they seem to have defined the debate in terms of some of the stuff about disrupting the event. I don't really think that, you know, a few angry Christians in the corner of Pride away from the main procession, which they were at the Pride this year, really is disrupting the event. They're usually drowned out by the cheers of the crowd. And also in terms of the points that the second proposition and third proposition started with, I'm also gay, but I won't be advertising any of my Snapchat or anything like that. Anyway, so the point that the second proposition speaker made in terms of the proposition say they support free speech and people can express themselves however they like, but not if they're expressing themselves in a disrespectful or hateful way, which, if you think about it, is a bit logically inconsistent. One of the examples used by the second speaker on the proposition was if you got up in the church and started, you know, shouting stuff that was against the church. The difference is one is private property and one is a public space. And in the public realm, we all have freedom of speech.
On that point?
No. Fundamentally, the opposition is the side in this debate that supports freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion. Pride is supposed to be a celebration of freedom, the increasing freedom of LGBT people within our society. And you don't support freedom by restricting the freedom of others. Can street preachers be annoying? Yes. Can they use rhetoric that can be hateful and directly opposed to the loving message that many followers of Christ are drawn to? Also yes. But you don't make progress as a society through censorship. You don't change hearts and minds by silencing people. You also don't change hearts and minds by shouting at people in the street that their lifestyles will see them burn in eternal damnation, but that's kind of beside the point of this debate. You do it for engagement. You do it through reaching out to those whose views may be diametrically opposed to yours and having a civil discussion. Surely we in Northern Ireland must understand this better than anyone. Surely we in the Literific must understand the importance of civil engagement. The proposition has told you this evening that street preachers are spreading hate, that hate speech is not free speech, that Pride is supposed to be a safe space. and that by having street preachers anywhere near the main procession spewing hateful nonsense that is supposed to be, that is usually drowned out by the noise of the crowds anyway, that we are causing emotional harm to vulnerable members of our community. But I'm here to tell you that Pride has never been a safe space. Pride, in fact, has its origins in a very unsafe space. From the Stonewall riots, to the Christopher Street Liberation March, to the Pride protest today in parts of the world where the LGBT community is still severely oppressed. The people who've been carped at, spat on, beaten up by the police, and worse. We are not about, and have never been about, sitting in our echo chambers, hiding from the brutal reality of the world, pretending that the opposition to us doesn't exist. We have been the silenced, not the silencers. We have been the oppressed, not the oppressors. To make progress as a society, sometimes you have to go outside your comfort zone. Sometimes you have to engage with people who dislike you, who question your very existence. This year was my very first Pride, and I was delighted to be able to spend it with our very own President and Secretary. At the end of the march, with its joyful campness and revolutionary socialists mixed in with multinational corporations, I saw a group of marchers go to have a chat with the preachers, and while I did not overhear the contents of their conversation, it seemed to be fairly civil and both sides were engaging with each other. And I thought to myself, this might be the first time that some of the street preachers had ever engaged in a constructive dialogue with someone from the LGBT community. And that matters because we have a wide range of backgrounds, and our views and outlook are shaped by our divergent experiences. We even have divergent views on the opposition tonight. But I think that's why I try as best as I possibly can. Go ahead.
The thing is, when you're speaking to people, fair enough, there are people who are up for chat and up for debate, but there's also people who are screaming your face and telling you that you'll go to hell no matter what you say to them, and that is hate speech. Like, if you call someone a pedophile and all that kind of stuff, it's hate speech. And also, like, with the fact that it's censorship, if you just move them away, there are places where you can do that now. Like, there's where literally preachers aren't allowed within a certain realm in abortion clinics, for example, because it's not the correct place to go to someone. And also they have free speech online and they have free speech in their churches. So if they just do it in a different place, how is that censorship?
Because I think that, and I'm going to come on to this point, I think it's incredibly important that the example that I'm just giving about instances where you have that engagement is incredibly important. Because even if they didn't change the minds of the preachers, and they probably didn't, I think they did a service to society by going to have that conversation. They increased ever so marginally our mutual understanding of one another, and they humanised LGBT people, maybe made the street preachers think that we're not the devil incarnate. So street preachers can be a nuisance. They can be anywhere from mildly annoying to grossly offensive, sometimes harassing people going about their daily lives. But I think we go down a very slippery slope as a society if we think that can be used as justification for banning people expressing views in certain areas and suppressing dissent. Freedom is messy, freedom is unsafe, freedom can make you feel uncomfortable, but we should never think that history is a linear line to progress. It may be some of us one day will have views outside the boundaries of acceptable opinion. And it may be you who faces having your freedom of speech suppressed. So I urge you not to listen to the siren calls for banning street preachers from Pride. I urge you to vote with the opposition tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. to tonight's speakers. It is now our opportunity to turn to questions from the floor. But before I do so, I would like to put on the record an apology to the second speaker of the opposition. There was an allegation made of religious, I can't say the word, religious, what? Proselytizing. This allegation is, I believe, untrue, and I'm sorry for interrupting your speech when you were going for it. With that being said, I'd like to kick off with questions to the proposition. If anyone has any questions for the proposition, raise your hand now. Yes, go for it. State your name, please.
James Ocean. I think a lot of this debate has been this idea that there are certain street preachers who will say offensive things and there are other ones who are less likely to. Can I just ask the proposition, clearly, ignoring rhetoric, would you ban street preachers? Why any regard for rhetoric?
No, there is a distinction.
Okay, just on the record.
As in but do you
in
mean,
principle.
so do you mean,
all or
so just even the ones that are fluffy and nice?
What do you mean everyone? I just want on the record.
Clarify.
Just want on the record.
Is this from Pride or Techno?
Emotions
At the beginning of the motion, we made the distinction that it was hateful to street preachers and seeking to disrupt the event. So we would ban them. I actually would quite like to see Christian street preachers dancing in the group with us. That'd be quite cool.
Yeah. So I think one problem I have with that sort of framing is it's, I think, narrowing the scope of the debate so much. I think the opposition's been kind to the proposition in allowing the distinction to be made that we are talking about the hateful street preachers here. But I think that the point made that it's only those that are disrupting the event, I think is kind of is narrowing the motion to a point that it would be sort of outside the way that the motion was framed. And I wouldn't say that because I was the one who suggested this motion. But yeah, so I think we've been kind to the proposition by not coming back with, but they're all like these nice street preachers as well. So I think we've given them that, but I'm not giving them it's only the ones that disrupt the event. I think that's a bit too much.
Do we have any questions for the opposition? Yes.
So I'm from Redpath. I love my trying to protest to the street preachers, some of the street preachers in Belfast. This year at Belfast Pride, I was one of the ones that went over and engaged with some of the preachers there because I know them, so I did give them some help and I had to hold the debate. But during the Pride event, there is going to be the barricade here for the London City Hall, which is where they have been arranged by the Parade Commission. There was, however, a few that weren't there that were going along the Pride Parade route, screaming and yelling at teenagers, bringing up some more, saying that that's homosexuality is the reason which should be destroyed, which isn't. It was lack of justice and all that, but that's besides the point. They were screaming at these teenagers got physically upset. I was with my mother, I walked out and I listened to what the preacher was saying first of all, then I engaged with him using scripture and all that. So in that context, some of the stuff he was saying was so hateful, and you can see how much it was affecting. Now, I spoke to him calmly. I say I can because I'm used to this. I'm 25 years old. I'm used to this all my life. I've been victim of hate crime recently. I've been assaulted and all that. I spoke to him calmly, stay calm, give him a hug afterwards and say, God bless you. Jesus loves you, what you're doing is love for Christ. And that made the preacher cry and him walk off. Mm-hmm. I do believe freedom of speech is very, very important. Freedom of information is very important. But for him walking along the Pride route, doing that, was actually breaking the law there because you have to apply for the Parade Commission. So what would you say to people like that? That was this year's Belfast Pride. What would you say to that?
What I'd say to that is, I think there's a distinction here between what we're arguing in terms of the motion and that example. I think if you're going around harassing people and shouting, directly in their face and stuff like that, that obviously does break the law. If you're being, physically sort of threatening or all that sort of stuff, I think that is obviously where the line is drawn. But I also think that that banning street preachers from Pride is a line too far, and also that it prevents the sort of other sorts of discussions that you will have had that does make that progress. Like I said in the speech, you might not change the person's mind, but you at least get to understand each other a bit better. And you know, I think that's how we make progress as a society, is when you can have those interactions, and banning street preachers prevent that.
Proposition to respond?
I absolutely commend you going over to do it. You're a better man than I am.
You may have seen it before market today. It was like half an hour something today, so it's not today.
To be honest, with me, I would probably, if I had to walk on, or if I was feeling ballsy, I'd drop a snarky comment. So, you know, you're better than me. But I mean, I think it's no surprise that we're doing that. I mean, hate's gonna hate, you know. To quote Taylor Swift, hate's gonna hate, but you can't defend that. You cannot defend it. The idea of going up shouting at teenagers and telling them how they're all going to go to hell, you know, how they're all evil people, that's where they shout. There's no defending it. It's awful. It's simply disgusting, and it sickens me to the core.
Do we have any abstention questions? Yes?
Yeah, this is my idea. This is kind of more of like a statement, I guess. What would you say about the fact that if we ban street preachers from Pride, it might get rid of one of my personal favourite activities of making fun of them? Whenever I'm walking up the road, is to just stand in front of them and take the absolute piss out of them, because you can tell by their face, it makes them feel very small. I have never seen someone so angry just that someone exists, and I find it personally hilarious. And of course, they do a lot of very horrible things, but at the end of the day, I personally wonder, would you maybe reconsider the fact that they're there, because we get to really enjoy taking the mick out of them.
You were first last time. I'll go for opposition first. Then if you want to take it. Any of you?
I completely agree with your statement. That's my attitude. I think the beauty of queer solidarity in the modern age is that we have the support system to emotionally support us from feeling bad when strangers yell horrible things at us, and we need to evolve to the next stage where we're like, they're ridiculous, man. We should make fun. There's more of us than them. You know, we should make them feel bad. Yeah.
Proposition to respond.
It's fun to laugh at him. There are a lot of people who are not in an emotional place to do that. There are a lot of people suffering with horrendous internalized homophobia who, like, hearing some of that stuff, it's just going to send them spiraling. And so not everyone is in a position where they can laugh at them. So, yeah.
It's now time to turn our attention to the vote on. A window into the soul of Jimmy Warren. Our vote on speaker ability. So you're not voting how you yourself view the motion. You're voting on who you think has spoken best at tonight's debate. So if you think the proposition has spoken best at tonight's debate, you can raise your hand now.
That's fully confidence.
Yeah, speaker ability.
You're allowed to vote.
I know, I was first.
Oh no,
I'm a little hurt how surprised you are.
What are you doing?
I'm having fun, and I'm actually.
You're voting against your own
I'm playing by
side?
the rules. It's supposed to be speaker ability.
Oh, okay.
You can actually listen to the rules. You're on it.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say yeah, even though it wasn't. 38, yeah. If you think the opposition have spoken better at tonight's debate, raise your hand now. Yeah. If you want to abstain on the vote of speaker ability, you can raise your hand now.
Are you raising hands? Yeah. Sorry, was it me? I don't know, I'm still not sure right now.
Yeah, go for it.
So the final vote for speaker ability is 38 for aye, 13 for nay, and 5 is abstentions, so the proposition had it.
We're now going to talk about next week's debate very quickly.
Hi guys, me again. I had a break from speaking this week, I'm sure you're all glad. And I'm not speaking next week either, so we're all grand. That is the wrong list. That is next term's list. Spoilers. Sorry, I'm not good with spreadsheets. Right, so next week is this House regrets deposing Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. As I said, it's full with... Oh, I am speaking next week, sorry guys. I forgot, I'm sorry. As I said, not good with spreadsheets. So, I'll give up my space if anyone's really desperate to speak on the proposition for they do regret... I don't know why I put my name down. Anyway, sorry guys, I'm monologuing here. Anyway, so there is one space, I'm going to give up my space. There's one space on proposition next week, and that is it. The week after, they're on for this House would abolish mandatory coalition. There is one space on opposition, and for all the rest of the weeks, I only have 1 to 2 spaces left on every debate.
Wow.
So please. We have it on our Instagram. Please look at the term card. Please get your names in so you don't miss out on speaking on a debate you really want, and use the training events in the meantime if you want to build your confidence. Thank you.
Don't get up yet. Ellie and Jamie will be taking you down to the pub in Lavery, so follow them, and you're obliged to make sure you go.